Hi, and welcome everyone who managed to join us on time. Welcome to this very special session of the Young Scientist Network webinar. This session is very special also because we've organized it with a UK-based organization called BioSci Toolkit. And we don't have one guest, we have actually three. The first one being Dr. Jonathan Kayondo, who leads the Target Malaria Uganda team. He's also the head of the entomology department at the Uganda Virus Research Institute. Welcome, Jonathan, and thank you for joining us today. My other two guests are Abdulkabir Adenopo from BioSci Toolkit. So Abdulkabir is a PhD student based at the University of York, where he's researching antibiotic resistance. And the second one is Dr. Chinedu Agwu from BioSci Toolkit. She's the founder and the current CEO. So, Chinedu, can you just let us know more about BioSci Toolkit and its objective?
Of course, yes. Lovely to meet you all. As Ndei said, my name is Dr. Chinedu Agwu. I'm a lecturer in biosciences at Brunel University by day, but outside of that, I run a social enterprise called BioSci Toolkit. I just also want to say thank you to Lorraine and Ndei for the opportunity to speak in this webinar. So BioSci Toolkit is a profit-for-purpose national social enterprise, and we truly exist to really break down barriers into bioscience careers and empower students from Black, mixed, and global majority backgrounds to thrive in science and not just simply survive. We really seek to build confidence, competence, and advance equity in the bioscience space so that these students, people who look like us, can see themselves in labs, in academia, in policy, industry, and help to create science that serves our communities in the best possible way. Our main deliverables are school outreaches, so showing diverse role models to school students coming up, raising aspirations, designing resources that will help students on their educational journey. We also have a mentorship scheme where we partner students with mentors from culturally representative backgrounds, people who will resonate with their lived experience. And we also try to connect them with work experience opportunities to build their work readiness skills. So yeah, this is what we do. We truly believe in diversifying the bioscience pipeline one student at a time. It's definitely a long-term goal, but definitely doable when collaborating with the right network to share a joint vision. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Chinedu. Very informative. So now I'm going to turn back to Abdulkabir. We're just having some issues with the chat, but it should be open soon. And when it's done, feel free to just introduce yourself and also let us know where you're connecting from. That would be very nice. So yeah, I think the floor is over to you, Abdulkabir and Jonathan. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having us on, man. I just want to say a big thank you for this opportunity. It's very exciting. It's not every day that I get the opportunity to, interview and have a little bit of a conversation with someone as decorated and such a successful career as yours, Dr. Kayondo. So I guess my first question for you is, Dr. Kayondo, can you tell us a little bit more about your work at Target Malaria and at the UVRI? So that is the Ugandan Virology Research Institute, I believe. Could you tell us a little bit about the work you do there?
Yes, thank you. And welcome everyone. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. So the UVRI is the Uganda Virus Research Institute. Yeah, biology is a research institute. But myself, I'm a biologist with research interest in the genetics of select human disease-causing pathogens and insect-transmitting vectors. And I lead the Department of Entomology and also the core molecular and bioinformatics facility at the institute. And my work entails finding out or generating scientific knowledge, course and tools that will help us in enhancing the prevention control, of diseases. And towards that, I do a number of things, but most importantly, that I collaborate, I do research. One of the projects that I'm involved in is the Target Malaria, which is a partnership that has assembled different skill sets, different scientists, different other professionals that bring all their expertise to come and solve this very big, malaria problem by coming up with a tool that will help us control the vectors innovative way. That's using gene drive. But aside from that, I also do other research streams in my department, and I am looking at ways we could improve surveillance by adding genomic surveillance as part of it, and also build capacity on learners in terms of science.
Excellent. It sounds like you target this issue from a bunch of different angles and come at it with a bunch of different ways. And with a disease as complex as malaria and with such a long-standing history, I guess that's pretty much the only way you can go about it. I guess my next question is, how did you come to research malaria and what sparked your interest? Because if I remember correctly, you did your PhD at university in the US, I think it was Notre Dame, right? So did it start from there, or was it at a later point in your career that you decided this will be your focus?
Indeed, it was. So my initial interest after my undergraduate, so I did biochemistry and chemistry, was working in a hospital environment. That's how I saw myself as, where I wanted to be, and maybe that's what excited me most. However, of course, underlying that was the interest that I had, because the lab and genetics had a special appeal to me. So I felt those combinations led me to probably working in a hospital environment. That's where I was headed. And then something happened that really shook me. So while I was at it, getting initiated there, the health professionals staged a strike, and it was a sit-down strike. They laid down their tools, and then all of a sudden you have patients that were left unattended to, and they were just trying to negotiate with government, maybe to increase their pay and other working conditions. But I still felt that really shook me, and I thought I really couldn't be part of that anymore, and that really dampened my appetite for doing, direct health service delivery. So I explored research. I got introduced to the Uganda Virus Research Institute, and I interned there, got an attachment there. Then I zeroed in on malaria. But the actual turning point that really made me know for sure that this is what I wanted to do was I was attending a biology for disease vectors course. This was sponsored by the MacArthur Foundation, and then that also the WHO. And during that training, the scourge that malaria was really opened up to me. There's a way you see it, and the way you get to terms with it, and you don't really feel that maybe there's more that could be done beyond just what was going on. But during that course, the faculty was really, they were really very extinguished, they were really successful in their career, and were floating all these additional ideas. And one of them was, genetic biocontrol. Then I just got hooked up. And then from there, during that seminar, during that workshop, I linked up with one of the faculty who was actually training us and asked him, I think I want to be part of your team. I think I like that, and I would like to translate this back home. He said, yeah, sure. If you could do the graduate entry examination tests that were offered there, then maybe I could put you in my group, and then the rest is history. So that's how I ended up at Notre Dame, and then from Notre Dame back here.
Wow, that's that's a really insightful story. And I think what I find really interesting about that is I think a lot of people, when they're trying to decide where their scientific career is going to go, it tends to be that, things fall into place. They do a PhD placement, they learn a little bit there, and then it spirals from there. But it seems that you had kind of figured out the area you wanted to be in and then found a place that would allow you to get the skills to train into that, which I think is quite a unique and honestly probably the best way to go about it, because you had already the passion and the zeal for it going into it, and then to go on from there on. That's really inspiring. Thank you so much for that. So I was going to say, Nayran mentioned earlier that we're going to have some polls going throughout this. So our first poll is going to be asking about if there are any or several research bodies or universities in your country actively researching malaria. You could do just yes or no, and then you can just maybe just put a little bit of information in the chat if you wanted to as well. But yeah, whilst we wait for those answers to come in, I just thought, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about your time at the hospital, if you don't mind. So you mentioned that you were working in a hospital and they went on strike. I find it so pivotal because I have a mother that grew up working in the NHS, working in healthcare and all of these things. And it really sat with me because, when you see people that are, really at the forefront providing the care that's needed, and sometimes they're not given the tools to do so, it can be quite heartbreaking, can't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So actually, I was actually being enrolled, recruited. I hadn't really spent the one, but the idea was they thought they wanted to strengthen their unit for nuclear medicine, and I was really lined up, and they thought it was a good candidate. I was really very much excited about it. So then while we were in the midst of that finalizing, and then this strike happens. On one hand, I can understand their point, but on the other hand, I also know they are taking the Hippocratic oath. At least in Uganda, they try and do. So I really couldn't see how they could reconcile that. So, of course, some few remained, but many of them really made the point to force the government to make concessions. And of course, if you're on the side of those patients who were neglected during that time, it's hard. I think it's really hard. It just showed me that I wouldn't thrive in such an environment. I think that's just in my nature. But some people, of course, they can. I think you just have to understand who you are, and sometimes they take something to really shake you and show you that probably maybe that's not the direction.
I agree. I think definitely everyone has their own way they can contribute to research and health and stuff like that, and it may not look the same for everyone. But yeah, thank you for that. Seems the poll results are in, and it seems the majority of people are taking yes. I think it was about 90-something% yes. And I can see just from a brief overview of people's welcome messages, we've got people from all across Africa, some people from places in Europe and such. It's nice to see we're getting, a real broad spectrum of people. And yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the conversation so far. I know I definitely am. Great. So, my next question for you, Dr. Kayondo, is what are the different types of scientist profiles in demand in malaria research? So obviously, you like, for example, yourself, you are spread across a bunch of different ways to tackle malaria. So are we looking for, because obviously, you have a background in genetics. So I assume there must be a need for, maybe environmentalists, entomologists, and, potential breadth of different people needed. So if you could just give us a little bit of context as to what science profiles are in demand in malaria research.
Yes, I'll just tell you that I think fighting malaria is really very difficult. And from that, it requires, lots of expertise and different skill sets. So the research itself has many science disciplines involved. Traditionally, there are those that are very easy to maybe relate with. For example, the classic medical entomologists, so they'll be very much focused on studying mosquitoes, those transmitted disease. And then you have parasitologists, those will be focused on the parasite, the causative agents that causes, the malaria itself. Then you'll have ecologists who will do a little bit more. So they'll be studying, for example, the vectors, and then they also the parasite. But then they also add in another component of the interactions with the environment, sometimes with that whole picture to come up with a better understanding. And then there are clinical researchers, biologists. Sometimes they're trying to try out different innovations and drugs that we have. So we'll be involved in that space. And then you have public health professionals, they're also diverse. And then you have drug discovery researchers, who are also specialists. And then you also have those that still cut across even in their own discipline. For example, a lot of those that I've mentioned earlier, they'll use molecular biologists, they'll use, for example, bioinformaticians, and they'll use biostatisticians and immunologists. So those can be cut across. So those skill sets are also very essential. And then there are emerging disciplines which are becoming more and more prominent and hard to not, have around. Like bioinformatics is now modeling, the data scientists, etc. So so there are all those. Sorry, music.
Honestly, and it's amazing just how many people it takes to tackle a disease. And obviously malaria is incredibly complex. It's been around for a long time. And then just as you were mentioning these different disciplines and these different titles that people are needed to study malaria, it just really reminds me that nowadays in science it's not the same as it used to. Everyone has to wear multiple hats. You might be a molecular biologist by trade, but before you know it, you're a biophysicist as well, and before you know it, you're a chemical biologist a little bit as well. And it's quite interesting the way science is shaped. I remember growing up when I was around 11 years old. I think at the time I wanted to be a paleontologist, so like a very different type of scientist. And I had this image in my head that you're a biologist, you're a chemist, you're this, and you sat in those little groups. But obviously times have changed, and it's not necessarily as straightforward as that, is it?
It's not. Yeah, it's really not.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So my next question for you is, which research areas are most popular and which ones are hardest to recruit for in Africa in your experience?
Okay. For me, when I look around, I see the public health space. This place seems to have people lined up. maybe it's just more direct and easier to relate with, probably. But then also from a research institution, I see molecular biology being also popular. Listens to clamor for it. And then now I'm seeing that over the last 3 years or 4, I see bioinformatics also becoming of appealing. So those 3.
Excellent. And are there any that you think are really that it's really a struggle to find in Africa? Like maybe there's a specific, discipline that's really needed that for some reason it's just not as easy to bring those researchers over. Do you know of any of those off the top of your head?
Yes, it is. So I see that we struggle with the specialization in entomology, especially those who we call taxonomists. Those are very good people who identify things, classically. And for some reason, I don't know why, maybe even at the university, those units, maybe they don't seem to be the function or not there, but this is not a lot. And so now a lot of things, most people end up relying on molecular, but they're going to a situation where that's not enough. You really need those ones that struggle. Also having really good ecologists, let's say distinguished ecologists, at least in the space that I'm in, when I'm looking at mosquito vectors, very help those ones are they're very few. And I think maybe it's the training, something. Yeah, we just don't seem to get those ones. And then I would also say, so of course bioinformatics is popular, but it's just not a critical mass yet. So we still struggling with those. But then also you also have to get them, you lose them, and then there are very few of them.
Yeah, I think it's kind of the nature of research, isn't it? The way people move around a lot, and you might end up with a sudden boom where everyone and all the money is going towards, a certain research field, and overnight that can just flip, or seemingly overnight. I know in the UK we definitely deal with that a lot with funding struggles and so on and so forth. Right. So the next poll out for the audience is, my question to you is, do you think the contribution of African scientists to malaria research is sufficiently recognized? So Neyman will put that up and you guys can answer away. And I think whilst people are not answer that, I think one thing I found interesting is you mentioned, ecologists and things like that. I know, just from my background in the universities I've been a part of, there seem to be a lot of researchers that will do a lot of ecology work, but obviously they're based in a university in the UK, and a lot of the ecological research that they're researching are in Africa. So it's sort of like a lot of the kudos ends up in the place that doesn't actually have access to what they're researching. Like I know people will be researching, certain. I remember there's someone I spoke to researching very specific species of ant. I don't remember off the top of my head, but all of his research, all of the data collection doesn't take place in this continent. It's all in parts of, I think, sub-Saharan Africa, and it's quite wild that obviously all of that funding, all of that research output now comes to university in Europe. It's quite interesting how things have worked out, isn't it?
Yeah, that's situation.
Yeah, and it's oh, the polls come through. That was quite quick. So we've got around 25% of people saying that they believe malaria research is sufficiently recognized by African scientists. 68% no, and 7% say they don't know. So it seems like a majority of people saying they don't think it's sufficiently recognized. And I'm wondering, I don't know, I'm trying to think if I agree on that, because I'll be honest with you, I think being from a European university, it tends to be the majority of research I come across tends to be from other European universities. So I would lean towards agreeing to that. I don't know if you have any, obviously you being someone that's researching malaria within, Africa as well. Do you find that do you feel that research has been undervalued coming out of Africa, or do you think it's a little bit more even now?
I'd say I think I'll argue with the results from the poll, but I would also tell you that not only just malaria scientists, I would say that African even scientists as a whole, they're almost not visible. And it took COVID for people to really even appreciate that they exist and they even start, valuing them. But the government has been trying very hard to promote sciences, but that's the path towards development, etc. But without it, they're not really. I don't say recognized. The word maybe is recognized, but it's also their own underdoing, if I may say so, because most of them, actually what we do is we are very keen on doing the experiments and then publishing journals where these other people don't really read. So it's hard for them to even see you. and we don't try to maybe extract from those journals, maybe package the science in a way that even an ordinary person, could maybe understand it and appreciate it. There are some of those efforts going on, but we still have, long ways to go. So I would say the problem is there, and we should be able to do more.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. This reminds me of a conversation I was having in my undergrad at Durham University. They had a whole scheme of trying to really address the idea of the colonial aspects of research, and there's a lot of colonialism still embedded within research. And I took part in that program. One of the things I did was highlighting research from countries that you typically don't see research from. So I'm Nigerian, so I focused on renewable using plantain waste and corn waste as a form of biofuel. And I did a whole podcast series on talking a little bit about that. And as I was researching for that podcast, I just found how difficult it is to actually come across quite naturally a paper from an African country. So I know I didn't know about it was like in malaria, because I know malaria, there's a lot more African countries involved in malaria research. But in general, I found that it's you have to really be looking for it. It won't pop up automatically. But yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Right.
But for example, let's say even if it did not pop up on, say, PubMed, there's no reason why, for example, the African universities that have these departments, they have their own journals and they publish that, they could create their own, so that you can still find it even if it's not through the usual filters, Yeah.
Yeah.
But so there's more that can be done. But everyone, of course, wants to put it in Nature, to put it in Science and PNS, but then very few people read those journals, and then they also require subscriptions, and so if you don't have a budget, then you're not part of it, and they're not visible to you. Yes.
Yeah, it's a difficult landscape currently, isn't it? Incredibly difficult.
Yes.
So, my next question for you, Dr. Kayondo, is what would you say are the most innovative or exciting areas of malaria research right now? You can say your own research. I wouldn't hold it against you.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I do have a bias in, vector control. So of course, I'm going to start there, because here the focus is to try and do more so that we can bridge, some of the gaps that we are seeing, the protection gaps that we're seeing with existing control interventions. The main ones are the nets that are impregnated with insecticides, and then also the insecticides that are created so that they can last a little bit longer. They're called residuals. So those are used and sprayed inside houses. So those are the main ones for vector control. And so there are many developments that are going on that I would say are exciting, which are trying to look at additional ways that we could overcome some of the challenges that we are grappling with. So one of them, the challenges we're grappling with, is the insecticide resistance. So that's of course lowering the effectiveness of those tools. Others, it's behavioral changes, behavioral choices, people, for example, not accepting to sleep under the net for different reasons. So we need tools that can help us, in situations where that can't be done, or the tools can't be used the way they are. So we have various genetic approaches and biocontrol innovations that people are working on. For example, the GM mosquitoes, those are meant to reduce the populations of mosquitoes, or even to change the vector competence so that the mosquito can't be transmitting. There's work on entomopathogens where they're harnessing bacteria or even viruses and fungi to try and, act as, let's say, insecticides of sorts. And then you have people looking at the vector microbiota. These are the endosymbionts, to see whether they could use those to control the vector populations. We see developments of platforms that can improve the surveillance so that it's now can use the whole genomes, can use new technologies now. Then there are innovative insecticide approaches that people are considering. There are people who are looking at special emanators, and these ones will try to fix the problem where someone can't use the net. There are communities which are pastoralists, they stay outside, etc., or even their houses are not big enough even to contain a net. So then the nets will not be solutions for them. Something with insects. So they'll need additional other tools that can help bridge some of those gaps. And then there are next generation nets and sprays which incorporate new active ingredients in them. So those could help with insecticide resistance. Then we also have machine learning, AI powered identification of things, cameras, etc. When you look at them, those look cool and exciting. But not forget the parasites. Like this also work there. They're also tackling vaccines. They're coming up with new ones that they think change the way we do things. They're looking at additional drug targets that could be targeted. And then they also have innovative diagnostics of their own. Hear them talking about using the smartphones, to do the diagnosis, etc. So there's a lot of cool things out there that are happening.
Oh, excellent. No, it sounds exciting. It sounds like from what you said, there's so many different fields that will be coming in touch with this sort of research. I think one thing I found particularly interesting is when you mentioned about whether how the nets are being used, because I think that's one thing as scientists we're really guilty of. We design something, we think, this should work perfectly, but you bring it into the real world and you suddenly realize that, small little things like, the size of the bed, the average size of a bed, the average size of so on and so forth can really affect how people use these products. But yeah, no, excellent. Thank you so much. And linked to that, actually, so I wanted to get your thoughts on malaria research at the global level, across the different continents. What your opinion is, of it is, and also, do you think there's a sort of a bias of the type of research that's happening in certain regions, and so on and so forth?
Maybe before you go, I'm just looking at the chat. Someone is saying my audio is not clear. Do you hear me well, or
I think I can still hear you
Yes.
fine now. Neyman, can you hear Jonathan as well?
Yeah, very well. The sound is a bit metallic, maybe that's why, but we can hear you.
Okay.
And we can understand
sorry.
you. Sorry,
I
patience.
apologize. Okay, sorry if I can. Okay.
It's all good.
Wow, bye-bye. All right. Let me now repeat. Sorry, I was looking at the chat.
Yes, of course. Yeah,
That's-
no worries. Yeah, so I was just wondering what your thoughts on malaria research at the global level, because the research that's going on in Africa might, not necessarily be the same sort of ways of tackling it that's being investigated in America, Asia, or Europe, for example. So I wondering what your thoughts are on those, and if you see any trends in any biases, like maybe the Americans are leaning more towards the nanodiagnostic sort of things, and less towards other types of ways of tackling malaria.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So my whole take on that is I could say that some things are just factors. So the research ecosystem is more developed and established the global north than the south. So in terms of quantities and numbers, one can say that so most of the malaria research actually you could say it is taking place there. Maybe what I would say, so therefore one is looking for training opportunities and even collaboration. I think it's a good thing. You can to also part of it there because that's a good opportunity. But on the other hand, malaria remains a tropical disease. So it's at the forefront in malaria. So it also depends on what it is that you're researching on. So if you're looking at where I think action is going to be when it comes to, let's say, trying to do the final push, trying to aspire towards elimination, the different things that can be done when in research. So a lot of activities actually is really likely to taking place in Africa because that's why the disease is it's akin to seeing that. So there's a fight. Because we're fighting in the trenches, interfacing the enemy direct. That's where most of the action likely to happen. Then of course you can also have capacity fighting a little bit for instance. So I would say that if you are interested in things whereby you can really be at the forefront, people in the trenches, I think, or even do much more than lab, then I think the African ecosystem can be equal because almost so you have the parasites and then you can have the labs and then you also can have networks and the partnerships that be required. So in the end, it's see how you position yourself. You have to look at the niche and see where. But I think for me, it's really a unique opportunity to be fighting the malaria right. It's stronghold. So nothing can beat that. But then that said, wherever the research is taking place in, the malaria research is very much collaborative. So you're still going to need, partners. Just have to know how to, of course, manage them. And then lastly, the research community formally is really very small. So we know each other, etc. So
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So we have one more poll before we move into our Q&A section. So this question for the audience is, what needs to be done to advance scientific research against malaria? So I think Neymar will put that up now, and you have a few different options you can pick from, being more funding or more collaboration with foreign researchers, more technology transfer, and the last one being a better understanding of traditional medicine. All right. And whilst those go ahead and get answered, Dr. Kayondo, I was going to say actually, when this opportunity came across for me, because obviously my research doesn't really have much to do with malaria at all, but I've come across, just in passing from reading headlines, reading papers, and so on and so forth. But I think it was 2 weeks or just before I got the email from Neyman and Chinedu. I was attending a guest lecture at the University of York, and it was actually run by an old colleague of mine from Imperial College, who was now set up his own lab and is researching malaria, funnily enough. But he's doing it from a very different angle. So he has a background in nanotherapeutics and biomaterials. So he is essentially developing a mechanism to essentially load a nanoparticle with these receptors on the top that would target the malaria parasite at a specific stage in its life cycle. And I just thought it was absolute coincidence that, I happened to go to that lecture and have that very fresh in my mind. And then to come across reading your profile, being like, oh, this is someone tackling malaria from a very, very different angle. But yeah, his name is Adrian Niger. I don't know if you've come across him before, but he does a lot of really interesting work at Imperial.
But kind of
Yeah.
absolutely, yes. And yes, and the fight against malaria, it's also multi-pronged. So even if you're fighting malaria, you have to fight it from different angles. We have to have a chance of winning.
Yeah. Complex disease like this requires a complex solution, doesn't it?
Right.
Yeah. So looks like we've got the poll in now, and it seems like people think pretty much all of these, more funding, more collaboration with foreign researchers, and more technology transfer are the main ones that people are saying are necessary, and better understanding of traditional medicine to a slightly lesser sense, and a few people have put other. But yeah, I think I pretty much agree with that. Like, like we've been saying throughout this, you really need as many different technologies and there's many different ways to tackle a disease such as this. So
I agree. Yes.
I think the last thing we're moving on to now is the Q&A section. So this is the audience's opportunity to put some questions forward to Dr. Kayondo, to pick his brain, maybe some queries or some better understanding about malaria or some questions about his career journey, because as we're learning here, he's had a very interesting and very, very inspiring career. So please go ahead and put your questions in the Q&A section. And whilst we wait for those to roll in, I have a couple questions of my own because I've really enjoyed this so far. And earlier on in our conversation, you talked a little bit about, the way science is communicated and the way we spread that information, and like basically how we communicate that research to other people. And I think as someone researching malaria, this is, something that affects a lot of people massively. And a big problem with diseases is sometimes making sure that the general public understand the research, understand how the disease spreads, understand what they can do to combat it. So I was just wondering, how do you feel during your career, how has the communication between scientists and the public changed over time? Have you noticed any trends? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Or is it staying the same?
Yeah, I think it's much improved. I recall, I think when we started, I even don't remember some of the terms that we use now. Things like stakeholder engagement did not exist. Communication was more with promoting things than really actually trying to get a feedback so that at least you can all be aligned with the end users or the general public. But with time, you can see that these have now become very much entrenched in research, especially research that's keen to go beyond the lab. So from the start, projects, of course, all of them usually end up needing to go beyond the lab, but at least it's usually embedded in that, so that as you work, then you're communicating, but the scientists themselves are not very good at the communication themselves. So they brought in, social scientists and communication experts, and now teams really have those as colleagues, the same space, and they're the ones who really do a very good job. Also, I also see changes in that we would mostly worry about or be concerned with communicating the conventionals, which was through a publication, just give a seminar, but then that way you're just giving it to your colleagues or people who be interested, but that doesn't make it, get further out to the rest of the community. So now, there are all these other efforts that are being done, and you can see that I think there's a shift in the mindset on how we should be doing this.
No, I'm really glad to hear that, and definitely bringing in, people with various experiences, like, social scientists that have more experience communicating with the general public is definitely a good way to make sure that the information is transferred as clearly as possible. But also, hopefully, those scientists can pick up on some key skills from them as well. Because I believe that as scientists, everyone should be should work on their science communication skills. But again, we don't do research just for other researchers. We do research to better the world and to better people's health. And if the people we're doing the research for can't understand what we're saying, then what was it all for in the end? That's what I believe.
I could not agree more, Abdulkabir. Sorry to just get in. We just have a question in the Q&A, but I just wanted maybe to make it more specific because Dr. Kayondo, being from Uganda, I'm not sure he has thoughts on malaria education in Nigeria. So, Dr. Kayondo, maybe you want to let us know which areas we should invest in the future to be really able to train, the next generation of malaria scientists in Uganda or in Africa in general.
Yeah, so for me, that's where the gaps were that I mentioned. So I still believe that we have to be strong on ecology. So Uganda malaria is wide and everything, but some of the challenges that you're facing with is to do with either the interactions that we see or the behaviors and things like that, etc. So if we want to strengthen that fight, then the training also needs to be aligned so that I think the universities are also churning out people to be ready right from the outset. Of course, jump in and start solving the pressing questions using the tools, the technology that's there. So I think it's still good and is enough value to change, for me, the training, because it's also true that a lot of training, the way it's done, I would say it's not really based on problem solving. It's really more academic, trying to get grades, etc. So if some of the university could also shift and try to maybe focus their training towards more problem solving skills and things like that, then that will go a long way developing the next generation of researchers. But also, of course, there's the training, but then there's also the attitudes. I think in a lot of Africa, especially, people are very much discouraged with experimenting. I think experimenting is not a bad thing. Even if you fail the first time, it shouldn't be tragic. But a lot of, maybe it's culture probably, people are very much afraid to try out or even suggest something. And when they're working with even their supervisors, they feel that it's disrespectful to suggest something that's contrary, but that's really not. So I think even those who are doing the training also needs to appreciate that in research, the barriers have to be broken. For example, for myself, as here you're calling me Dr. Jonathan Kayondo, but I tell my team to just call me JK Jonathan. Because of the research institution, those barriers have to go if we're to have meaningful, discoveries and thinking, new ideas. So I think, the training also has to be reinvented as well. In addition to the disciplines, there are emerging disciplines that are coming that we did not miss out. I see a lot of, AI is being developed, but when I look at the reaction on the continent, all I see is just fear. AI is going to do this, AI is going to hurt us, AI is going to. Meanwhile, AI, of course, it can be disruptive, but it's better if you're part of it and you know how to handle it, you'll come out ahead. Or else, the AI revolution is going to come, and then the continent, an entire generation is going to lose out. Just because everyone is so much afraid. So I'm not saying we don't take caution. We should, but we shouldn't be paralyzed that we're just banning it. We're just not being part of it. So the curriculum at the universities need to be cognizant of the emerging trend. They need to be responsive and see how they can be, part of it. And there are many ways that can be done.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think honestly, while you answer that, you answered one of the other questions as well, because another question was asking about, how can we tackle this at earlier stages by changing the curriculum at potentially undergrad and postgrad? And like you said there, we need to think about ways that we can sort of, these emerging technologies, take advantage of them and not be left behind. And I agree with your point on AI. It is definitely like people in general have a big fear about it. But I think as scientists in research, it has a lot of scope as long as it's used for the correct things. And whilst you're answering that, we've got a couple other questions. So the next question is about what can be done to interrupt parasite vector interactions and sort of the ethical implications and considerations around manipulating mosquito genetics and how you can do this without affecting the natural ecology of this. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you think.
Yeah, I think the participant is here expressing maybe concern or worries about the boundaries of malaria research. Are there areas where we shouldn't go just because we're not sure? What do you answer to that as a scientist? Do you have like any line that you never cross personally?
Sure. As a scientist, you're trying to consider everything. Of course, there's also the precautionary principle. So the idea is not to close out an idea completely because you're saying it's never, never, never. But the idea is to look at all the factors. Now, the beauty about science is that it can be scrutinized. So if you really stick to the scientific approach, my view is that you should be fine, because whatever it is that you're worried with, as long as you're not trying to go into the whys, but if it's just, for example, the how and how come, that kind of thing, those kind of answers, one can generate them. And so, for example, if you thought that, let's say, if I modified, say, the mosquito so that it cannot transmit the parasites, maybe the parasite, for example, could be extinct, and then that could lead to something. So that can be scientifically tracked. And you really look at the pathways, for example, that could lead to that, and you dig deeper, and then you can really probe specific things, as opposed to having just very broad fears that make you not be able to advance. It's just easier to look at the whole thing and then go in depth and then try to pin out the exact specific mechanisms that could really to know what you're afraid of. And then that's where you know how to draw the line. That's more informed than right from the beginning. But also, we also have to remember that there's always a fast for everything. Yeah. And so just because the argument is not evidence that this was done and it worked, also shouldn't be a reason to stop or not pioneer something. As long as you spend enough time, consider each and every possibility that you can conceive of. As long as you can draw up and put up what you call some mitigation measure, in case for things that can't foresee, there are some mitigation measures that are sound. As long as it can be queried by, of course, other scientists, but even other people as well. At the end of the day, for me, my take is there's really nothing that may be consequence-free, but the question is, can we deal with those consequences? And it all depends on what the problem is. Because at the end of the day, you're balancing a solution vis-a-vis the problem. So as long as you're not creating a bigger problem than there is, even if you solve something, and if you create a little bit of others, as long as it can be tackled, that should be, of course, to make us not worry. But to be specific on the question, for example, when he says, let's say you modify, you're trying to create, let's say, refractoriness in the mosquito so that, let's say, they cannot pick up the malaria parasite, so they cannot develop. So you could do that, and there are ways of how that could be, because if you look at the malaria life cycles, you know how it goes. Because the parasite has to be picked up by the mosquito through the blood, and then it has to establish itself in the main gut. So one way, of course, could be if you could find targets, because it needs receptors for it to pick the parasite. So if you could find a target and you modify those receptors so that either somehow they get different and the parasite can't use them to enter, or you create a molecule that can have your antibodies to block those receptors, then when the parasite comes, it has no targets to use to enter. So there are many angles how that could be done. That's possible. Now you have now to follow that with safety profile. You profile it and you look at, okay, the one that has modified like that, is it dangerous to the ecosystem because you're worried what a modified mosquito in that manner, what else could it cause? Because maybe preventing the malaria parasite establishing itself is good, but then on the other side, maybe the animals that maybe feed on it may be harmed, and that can be tested even experimentally. Just need to set up a nice experiment whereby you have your modified ones and you have your non-modified ones. You have those animals that you think feed on them, and you expose them to this and you track them. See, is their weight affected? Is their health affected? So those things can be answered, and you can regenerate lots of data to come up with a profile and an understanding of the implication of what would happen, even if it's the ecosystem. Of course, you may not target each and everything, but you may have to be selective. You may decide, I'm going to go fast and be interested maybe on those that most people find valuable, maybe affected species. You can choose, and if it's safe for them, then you can assume it's safe for the others. But if it's not, then that's where you stop. But I wouldn't stop at the beginning before I've done anything. Just draw a line and say, no, genetic modification is out of the way, or I say, no, using AI is out of the way, it's too disruptive. I think you really need to take case by case approach, and you can go deep and scrutiny. So not continue.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much. So we've got several questions actually. I'm not sure if we'll have time to go through all of them, but we'll get through as many as we can. So I'm going to pitch this next question to you, and it's someone asking for how someone interested in they're enthusiastic in the field, in the research, how can they gain more exposure and knowledge and skills so that they can get opportunities in the future?
So that I would say, and then I'm going to speak from the experience I find in Africa. Let's say, of course, I know Uganda, maybe at East Africa, but it could be the same or less elsewhere. So I think sometimes you have to shape things. So I really don't know the context in which they are in. Maybe they just want to make a decision to go, but maybe they're not even anywhere close there. But whatever stage you're at, sometimes one may need to shape things a little bit. And what I've found is there's something that we really don't do a lot in Africa, but we should be doing it. It's called mentorship. So you start by looking out maybe some of the people who are doing some of the things that you think you want to do. Yeah, you look them up. And then you can just go and inquire whether it could be possible. They could mentor. Mentorship, like most people I think would be flattered that you want them to be your mentor. Mentorship is not the same as a supervisor. The supervisor, they have vested interest in you succeeding, and but a mentor, it's another angle for them. Yes, they want you to succeed, but is it not that pressure that you must really deliver? They wish you well. So if you could find some mentors, probably that would be the first step I would take. But if there are no mentors, but there's still a group that's doing what I think I'm interested in, I'll still walk up to them. But first read more about them, see what they're doing. Try to imagine what I contribute as part of, or even if it's just to say, I want to just learn more about this because I find it appealing to me, etc. And you just walk up to them, or even write to them, and just ask whether there's an opening. So initially, because you may not have the skills they need, so this would not be that you're going for them to hire you to give you a job, but it could be that you're just willing to do whatever it is, as long as you're part of them, even if it's volunteering, etc. Because you have to put a foot in their space for you to start making advance in that direction. And it could be flexible in the end. It doesn't have to be that every day you come, but you see what's possible. But most important, once then you are there, then you have to show some bit of commitment that you're serious. And most likely people identify those kind of people, and most cases they do whatever they can to help you, maybe mentor you, point you where the opportunities are, etc. So I wouldn't initially just give up yet. I'll first explore the path of mentorship, and the mentor maybe don't have to be even in your area. you just have to do some bit of homework and see who is doing what you're interested in, and then see whether they can be approached. Maybe you can't, but maybe you know someone who knows who can. That kind of. But usually, I would say if you are really keen, usually things end up working out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Definitely. I know from my personal experiences, I've had undergraduate students interested in my supervisor's research area asked to shadow me in the lab. And that was a good way because once they see your name, once they've seen your face, maybe they're on a committee for PhD application you're writing or so on and so forth. It makes it a little bit easier once your name is known. Excellent. Thank you so much. Right. So I think the next question we have is tackling malaria with a focus on drug discovery requires, certain skills and so on and so forth. What skills do you think these are? So essentially to tackle malaria with a focus on drug discovery, what skills and experiences should a young scientist have in order to do this? And does the network of training does the network have training to support young scientists? I think that second part might be a little bit more targeted toward Neyman. I'm sure you can email them later on, but yes. So what skills are necessary for focus on drug discovery in malaria?
Yeah, so I would say, okay, I'm not into drug policy, so what I'm going to tell you is from what I've read and also presentations I've seen people who are in that space, the kind of things that they do. Of course, the skills you need, I can see bioinformatics being very important because obviously you may need to locate your targets, where they're located, on the genome. And that's quite very good. So you get that. And then I also see some people, actually, they just repurpose previously used molecules and see whether they could work for their case. So malaria, and then you have all these molecules. So you need to have access to some of those molecules. So databases here, there. So you need that bioinformatics in addition to the molecular biology, able to grapple and navigate through all that space. But then at the same time, these days I see a lot of AI being used to again also help discovery or locking in targets that could be important. So again, you can get some of those skills, machine learning skills, etc. AI type things. You can also help. So there are a number of skills, but I think the most important one is, I think, it's a bit of interest and some molecular biologists. That's the thing to acquire. And then from the advanced. The others are easy to add on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So our next question is looking back, what has been the most important career advice you've been given?
I would say it's something I picked. I think we always had, journal clubs and presenting their works, etc. But then I just remember something that stuck with me. Yeah, so someone was presenting. I don't remember who, but for some reason this one stuck with me. So they're presenting and then they were saying lots of things, and then it happened to. So they were saying that what they first presented that this is very important and everything, but then in the end, you could see that what they did not reflect that, being as important as they were claiming it to be. So then my supervisor then just asked them, for example, if it's important, why not do it right, properly, have it planned well, think deep, all that kind of thing. And then, yeah. So to me, that's one of the things. So if something is really important, you really have to spend the time and really do deep thinking, even if it's at night, the pillow's looking up, something. You really give it time and really think through. And then when it comes to executing it, then do it. Then the other one probably I would say is don't fear starting small, because you can build. The problem is just not to start. But if you're gonna start. It doesn't matter. You don't have to start with a bang, doesn't have to be big. You have to start small. So if I could just use my own example, I would say, and also follow your heart at some point. Of course, the mind can do all the computation, but there's a time where maybe that's the other line that someone said, where do you draw the line? If your heart tells you don't go, maybe at some point, maybe that's when you should stop, because then it should not be you moving forward, after all. So I told you that, so I did my postgraduate at the US. And so because for me, I was really very keen to bring back the skills and restart something here at the Uganda Virus Research Institute. I was still thinking in that direction, but of course, sometimes it comes whereby you finish and then you start having doubts, and then you wonder, you say, okay, now gained all these skills, there may not be equipment, to, use my skills on, because the equipment I was using, I know it's not there. I have these other skills, no one even understands them. The environment is really very slow. Here, I'm very much supported. There's research support. They're there. Maybe I'll build my own, etc. All those things can come in and they can easily persuade you to abandon that and just decide, you know what? And of course, the offers that come as well. So the easier part. So for me, I really felt that I would be most productive here. And so I still stuck to my heart. And so the price for that was that instead of starting with maybe a very large group, that's very well funded and just go find a way, I had to start a little bit smaller. I had to get what we're calling a reentry grant. It was just 50K USD, that kind of thing. And maybe you can have a salary or something, but I had materials, I had things, I could start something. I said, yeah, sure, I think that's gonna do it. And then you use that and then you build. So now looking back, I know that was right, and I can't see myself having been happier, than this. So sometimes, also follow your heart. If your heart's really telling you this is the direction to go, maybe you go. But even if there's some others, don't let those one dissuade you from, doing it. Just think, plan it, surround yourself, networks, and in the end, something works out.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I
Abdulkabir,
think,
maybe we just jump to the last question, which is more, on the topic. I'll give the floor back to you, and then we can, conclude this session as we're getting close to the time. Thanks.
thanks. Yes. So let's see. So I think, yes, the last question is, from your perspective, what concrete pathways and institutional mechanisms are most effective in supporting sustainable career development for early career researchers in Africa in malaria research, and particularly what terms of leadership, funding, access, and ownership of research agendas? So I think overall they're just asking, what concrete pathways and mechanisms are available to support early career researchers in Africa research in malaria.
Okay, yeah. So I would say, the partnerships and the strategies and the opportunities may not be well formed at the moment, but like I said earlier, one can still shape them, because sometimes that's what it takes to shape them. I would say the first angle would be, if you are, let's say, doing your doctoral, make sure you have good relationships with your supervisor, the team that you are in, because most times, even as you solve your PhD, you have a lot of things that are unanswered out of it, and that's not bad. Usually when we answer a problem, then you have more questions, and then the next research question comes from this one. So what you want to make sure is possible that they would let you carry your research that you're doing with them along with you, and then start it and establish it. So the research institution in Africa, you can tell them that you have some ideas and you have some networks that you can tap into, etc. Then they'll be more receptive, I think, to bring you on board than just say you don't have it. And also there's a way they look at the PhD as if it's the end. Yet, to be honest, you'd need a postdoctoral whereby you're still protected, because under PhD you're under pressure. Maybe you're just trying to graduate. So you need to get time to develop a lot of the things by yourself. You did, but now you need this postdoctoral whereby you can really now take risky things on, because now the graduation pressure is not there, etc. And usually that's lacking at the ecosystem, yeah. But I see some institutions that are starting this, so they have some postdocs also as well. That's a very useful, development, stage that's needed to grow someone for them to become a full-fledged or accomplished researcher. Now the partnership, they have to be the collaboration. So you want an institution that collaborates with others, because science is collaborative. Don't do work in silos anymore. So keeping those collaborations open if possible, and then the opportunities. Now I see lots of grant calls coming out as part of networks. So you really need to be a player in that kind of space. So those where you look, etc. And then I also talked about the mentorship. So if there's some bit of mentorship scheme, if it's not there, try to get one. That you shape things. I think go happen.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And yeah, like I said, that was the last question we'll have. I just wanted to say a big thank you for your time, Dr. Jonathan Kayondo. It's been an amazing experience. I've thoroughly enjoyed chatting with you. And thank you to Neyman and, Target Malaria for setting this up. I can see some links have been shared by Lorraine with some information about Jonathan and the rest of us. If you want to connect, you can feel free to do so there. But that's all from me. I'm going to pass back to Neyman to send us off.
Thank you so much, Abdulkabir. It was really a pleasure to hear you both converse. It was a really very special edition. Thank you, Dr. Kayondo. We know that you have such a busy schedule, so we really appreciate you taking the time to come here and inspire current students or researchers or postdocs. Just maybe a quick note before we let you go that World Malaria Day will be celebrated on April 25. So on the occasion, Target Malaria will release a toolkit available for everyone, social media toolkit, communications toolkit, to help you also advocate for more malaria research, but also most importantly for the elimination of malaria, which is really weighing very heavy on Africa. Thank you all. Thank you to BioSci Toolkit for the very important mission that you're doing with students, and see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.